Okay, guys, welcome to another episode. Have Jim and Zach here as well. So,
All right.
tonight we're going to be discussing perception versus reality. So, there's just things in life that we that we assume are true, but when you fact check it, it doesn't stand a test. So, that happens to all of us. It's kind of hard to know. And we're really going to be jumping all over the place. So, guys, get ready. This is going to be a whiplash session. We're going to go from cars to politics to animals to farming to food. And who knows what else is coming out of this. So, it's going to be all over the place. Just hold on. And the very first thing I want to talk about is I'm guessing you guys have heard of that parable of the blind men and the elephant, where these blind men and they all touch a portion of the elephant. One grabs his tail, the other grabs his trunk, the other grabs his legs, and one says, "This feels like a snake," and "This feels round," and others like, "This feels hard." Like, since they're blind, they don't get a full view of what's in front of them, and so they make conclusions. They make a partial conclusion. So I feel like we're like that as humans. We only see dimly. There's so many facts out there, and I've always thought about this. Sometimes I think, why did God not tell us more? But I think the more we know, since we're dealing with infinity, the more we know, the more questions will be answered. So even if we knew like twice as much as we do as humans today, we just have twice as many questions. So
there's a saying that nobody knows 10% about anything. So, because in any topic, there's more to be revealed, no matter what topic you're on. So, and it's kind of fun that we don't know it all, because that's kind of what makes life more of an adventure. I think it's great. So
that's so true. So I'm gonna start with Zach here. Zach, can you like name something that maybe you thought was true for quite a while, and recently you come to find out, oh, that's not really true, or maybe something other people have said very commonly is true. It's just kind of taken for granted, but you're like, that's not exactly accurate.
Well, I guess I probably need a while to have a really good example. The first example that comes to mind is kind of personal, so I'll keep it short. But when I got married, a lot of the stuff that I was told about what marriage would be didn't really pan out to be what I was told. And so it wasn't exactly a lie either, though, because all the values and stuff that I was, brought up with, they were and are good and true, and that's why I was, taught them. But they are not guaranteed, and so in some sense, I think it happens a lot for all kind of people where you hit some point in your life where you feel like what you were taught was a lie, but that can be kind of convenient, because that's like they did. It's all on them, those other people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that's just the first thing that comes to mind. Of a lot of what I was taught wasn't really false, but it wasn't like simple and easy like I was believing it was either.
Right. So, Jim, what about you? Like something, not necessarily just the fact that, obviously when we're younger and less experienced, we just don't know everything, and then we learn as we get older. So I'm not really talking about a maturity thing, but more of something that you're commonly told, and then you're like, or people will even argue vehemently about it, and then you're like, that's actually not true.
Yeah. I guess for me, I live inside a recovery mind, and because I went through recovery about 15 years ago, but there's a term called the poser, and that's the man that and it's also, there's a term called denial. And anyway, the poser is the man that we create when we're growing up in the world that we perceive, like you're saying, we perceive the world to be a certain way, and so we try to survive amongst the people we have, and we create the man that we think would appease and please people around us to survive. And the truth is that's all made up. And somewhere along the way, and at least for me and for many people, that it doesn't carry you through a whole life. And so it was weird, because so much of it was built into my identity, but it wasn't really who I am. I wasn't true to who I really was. And so so it's a lot. It's a pretty big paradigm shift when I came to the fact that I started looking at things truthfully and honestly, even especially with the guy in the mirror.
Right. So I'm just going to run down, and this is going to be a whiplash because we're really covering a lot of topics. So I'm going to start with cars because I hear people. If I make a video and I talk about something about, made a video of a Ford truck and I was like, here's some things I hate about Ford, and people attacked me. They were like, Ford is the best. Like these diehard Ford fans came out on me, and so people jump all over the place. I had a friend trying to tell me, oh no, Subaru by far is the best car. You have to have a Subaru. And somebody was like, no, Mercedes. I had one of those. It lasts 900,000 miles. I'm telling you, it's the best car. So, and so I told somebody this the other day. I was like, pretty much every car in the world, other than maybe Fiat, but all the major brands here in the U.S., I think every one of them made a really good car. Like there was a car, like I'll use Ford, like from 1999 to 2002, from 1999 to 2002, Ford made the 7.3 diesel. And it's, even to this day, probably one of the most legendary, most reliable engines ever produced in the world. It's totally capable of getting over 2 million miles on that particular engine. Like the engine will almost never die. You can put gas in it, oil in it. You can give out a gas. It's a very forgiving engine. So it was one of the best engines. And then you come out in like 2005 through like 2008, Ford made the Triton V8, one of the worst engines Ford ever produced. It wasn't necessarily a bad engine, but they didn't thread the spark plug holes all the way. They threaded only like 2 holes, and you would hear people driving, and all of a sudden it sounded like an air compressor. So people who bought that year model Ford was like, this is the worst Ford, worst truck ever. And then the people who bought like a 7.3, best truck ever. So you get this war going on. Same way with like Chevy. They produce some of those 5.3 old block engines. Yeah. I call it an old block, but some people call it something else. But one of the best engines ever. And then they come out with some engines that they start making a ticking noise. Some of the cams get loose in them, and you get this ticking noise. So when it comes to like cars, have you seen this where people are like adamant that this is the best? Mm-hmm. They may even recommend it to you, and then you buy it, and you're like, that was not so good.
The only thing I have to add on this topic would be that it's quite fascinating that what you value is, in a literal sense, kind of what you see, and you can see this in a very simple way with cars. That if you buy, for example, if you bought a PT Cruiser or whatever, you start to see them everywhere, but you would never see them if you bought something else. Right. And so you're like, your value system like kind of selects what you're seeing.
Exactly. I've seen that happen too. And then like a lot of luxury cars like Lexus, BMW, Mercedes, these cars are typically bought by people who kind of value style, and they have a garage, and they keep that car and they maintain it according to the book. So the reliability is increased by the fact that they care for it 3 times more than maybe somebody who buys a Chevy Impala or a Hyundai Elantra. These are typically people who are more on a budget, and they may not necessarily follow the maintenance procedures, and the car's backed up against the wood line, and there's trees and there's limbs falling on it, and so that degrades the reliability. So some of these cars that get a bad rap, not necessarily that bad. And I'm going to jump to John Deere. John Deere has been a great company, but they also make one of the worst lawn tractors you can possibly buy right now. It's got a plastic transmission on it. I make money off of it because they break all the time. But they also make some of the best. So, and then you have other vehicles like, let's start with like a Ford Explorer. A lot of people will say it's bad. Even Consumer Reports says like a 2021 Ford Explorer is bad. But there's one thing about the 2021 through 2025 Ford Explorer, probably one of the safest vehicles on the road right now. It and a Volvo, like all the crash tests consistently show this vehicle just not crushing at all, which is sort of why I bought one. Like, and even the police versions have like an X frame under the bottom of them so that it's certified to be rear-ended at 70 miles an hour in case the police has someone stop beside the road. He doesn't suffer any harm, or no serious harm. So, even though this car is not necessarily considered the most reliable car, at least from 2021 to 2022, it's the safest car on the road. So it's like, what do you want?
Your perception of it is different because you could fix whatever broke, and if someone who couldn't fix whatever broke, then that really, really matters.
Exactly. Do you want to live, or do you want to have something that's broke down all the time, but it's gonna crush you in like a tin can? This other one is solid as a tank, but maybe it'll be in the shop a couple of times. I think I'd rather be in the shop a couple of times.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
I didn't know that, by the way. So I'm taking notes. That's
these cars are like that. And then Toyota, I'll go back to Toyota. Like Toyota is known to be like one of the most reliable cars. But from like 2022 to 2023, the Toyota Tundras and the Tacomas are the worst trucks just about you can possibly buy. Like they're just awful. They're awful. Toyota, in fact, had to put a stop sale on like even the Highlander. They had to issue a recall on over 100,000 of them. They're literally having to put entirely new engines in these. And so they kind of ride on the wave of success. And now they still have this perception of reliability, but it's kind of crumbling. Like I think even Subaru's kind of overtaking them now in reliability. And so going to like gas, I'm sure you hear this all the time. People saying, you need to put high octane fuel in your car. Put 93 in it. This car has to have 93. And I would say, okay, that's true for like a car that calls for it, a car that's turbocharged. And typically like even pickup trucks, if you're pulling a heavy load, then if you put a higher octane, you may get a little bit more power. But usually it's more of a placebo effect. People are putting it in and they think, it's helping. And it's a lot of factors. It's the exact temperature outside. If it's really cold outside, your car is not going to get great gas mileage. And if it's hot outside, your car is also not going to get so that middle like 70-degree weather is where most cars tend to get like the best gas mileage, 70, 80, 60, somewhere in there. So, and then the gas station you go to, the brand gasoline they sell, that particular gas, or maybe even the exact gas you bought that day plays a big role in to, exactly what your fuel economy is going to be. I noticed if I buy gas at Buc-ee's, tends to be a little bit better. So like, I know I just covered mostly cars in that. What are like? Is there anything you can add to like your perception of any kind of car?
Well, I just thank God for the internet for this because we could get on the internet and get the information like on that Explorer, where years ago we couldn't do that. I mean, you're just buying something really, truthfully, on word of mouth.
Yes.
But now I can do somewhat of a consumer report. And I'm thankful for that.
Right.
Like what we do, we'll punch in common problems with a Ford Explorer from 20 to 21 or whatever, Right. So I'm real grateful for that. But to the point of tonight's topic is really seeking truth about things because just going on word of mouth is you're going on people's perception. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
So
even like the reliability that they post in like Consumer Reports, a lot of it's based off just how many incidents does this vehicle come back into the shop? And this can be as simple as like maybe the radio needs to be reprogrammed. Maybe your infotainment center stopped working. And that will get lumped into the total sum of problems that this vehicle has had. Mm. And so if a vehicle comes in with like maybe connectivity problems, Bluetooth connectivity issues, and then another car comes in with like transmission issues, they don't really weight those. They do show, like Consumer Reports will tell you like transmission versus drivetrain, paint, body problem. Like they will give you a section, but if you don't look at that, if you just look at total reliability, a simple Bluetooth connectivity issue is still counted against the car, just like a transmission issue, where it's, to me, that's like a very minor problem. I wouldn't even really, probably base a decision on whether I buy a car or not based off that. Versus like a transmission issue, that's like something much more serious. So I feel like they don't necessarily, they don't really discriminate on how they give these ratings. It's just like a 3.5 star, 4 star, 5 star. Well, I don't think any car gets a 5 star, but just So anyway, this changes people's perception. It has a huge effect on how people buy and sell, and just all these reviews you see on Amazon, somewhat the same thing. So yeah. And then I'm just going to flow right into like Delta and Spirit. We've had a lot of airplanes crashing, and I went flying to Delta, and one of my friends was like, "You're flying? Wow, you're so stupid. It's so crazy to be flying. It's so dangerous out there." And so I called a couple of pilots about it. One of them, my brother, and he was like, "Actually, flying incidents are kind of down right now. We've actually had more flying incidents in the past." Right. And that was even a perception I didn't have. I was like, I kind of thought they were elevated, but he was like, "No, they're actually a little down." He said, "We have like one or two more, then we'll kind of be like starting to top the list. But right now, when you take into account all airplanes, not just like airlines, and then the same way with like Delta and Spirit, so many people, since Delta's based here in Atlanta, we have to like cheer for Delta, right? And then Spirit gets like a bad rap. Everybody's like, "Oh, that is horribly." And I told someone I was flying Spirit. They were like, "What? Why would you do that to yourself?" The Spirit is actually considered one of the safest airlines in the world. Just that. But they do have rowdy customer service and clients. Like people, you see all these YouTube videos where people are fighting or whatever over their seats. But, just how that changes, because Delta is like premier. And if you want to fly first class, business class, you have to do that on Delta. You can't do that on a Spirit flight. So, yeah, I know this is all over the place. I'm gonna jump to another one, like spray foam insulation. You see people spraying that everywhere here in America, but then in Europe, if you spray foam insulation in your roof, you actually can't sell your house. It's much harder to sell your house because they're like, well, mildew will get behind the spray foam and you can't see it, and you can have rot up in your between the between the wood, the board, and then the shingles. So yeah, just things like that, and you're like, okay, I didn't even know. Like, you kind of think that was a great idea, and then you realize that's not such a great idea. So anyway, what's something you can add? Just any random thing, something that you were like, I just would have never known that. Like,
well, one that came to mind is that sometimes when people are about to release a book, they will buy a bunch, like thousands of copies of their own book to like rig the rating so that it will
the
be
author
on
will.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that it will be on like the lists and stuff. And then that like is its own like propagation at that point. Once it's on all the lists, then you have a much better shot or whatever. But people will do that. They'll basically rig things to make it look like they are more successful than they are, in hopes that they actually will be.
Yeah, and one thing that you made me think of is that I realized that a lot of the news, go back to the airlines, is really they kind of write the news versus report the news, because like you said, whatever they are reporting is what they're bringing to our attention.
Right.
So it gives us this perception.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And who's deciding that? That's what I want to know.
Right.
Who's deciding all that? Because it's kind of what we're being fed. It's the meal that's being set up here.
An
and
idea
I don't like
that I've had for many years is that, especially in politics, whoever sets the premise determines the outcome. So once you've agreed to this is what is important that we're going to talk about and fix, the discussion is over. Like, you can have 100 different ideas, but the real discussion has already happened and it's done now. You know, like,
right.
I don't know, if you were to say that America is like the most racist country on earth or something, you could come up with examples. I'm sure someone's doing something terrible to someone else right now, you know? So you could pull a video of that and post it and then be like, look at this. Well, how are you going to defend this or whatever?
Right.
You know what I mean? And then you can come up with 100 different ways about how you're going to solve it. But it's all, the discussion is over. The discussion should be, is the premise true? Rather than, here are my different takes, because they all lead the same way.
Yeah.
You brought up racism. So I'll say, in my early 20s, I had this idea that as a black guy, if I was ever going to go to a church, I was only going to be accepted more in a liberal circle. I felt like a conservative, all-white church with a bunch of old men in there would totally not be where I should be. Mm-hmm. And I thought that for a long time. Mm-hmm. I found almost the opposite true. And this is no dig against anybody who's liberally leaning in their politics, but this is like, I kind of thought I would be like welcomed in the purple hair, wild, liberal circles.
Sure.
Yeah. As a black guy, I'm like, I'm fighting for equality just like you, and that is not the case. I mean, even to this day, I have lots of liberal friends. I don't think not one of them will ever just call me randomly like, hey, how are you doing? You want to hang out? Like, none of them. But you know who will? Those old white men. This is not like trying to say anything against anybody. This is, I'm just telling you, I got a lot of old guys and they don't know a single thing about what I believe, my religion, anything. And they'll just be like, hey, you want to come over and eat dinner with me? You're like a son to me. And so they've been the nicest people ever in my life. And I live in Georgia. Like, I live in the deep South. You would think that I would just have nooses hanging up from my nail boxes every night. But that has not been the case. That has not been the case. That's not to say there hasn't been some racism. Sure. It actually has not come from evangelical Christians. Not one time. Not even one time.
On the perception, just made me think of that. And by the way, I didn't get much sleep, so I'm kind of out of it. But Dennis Prager, who's like a radio guy that I listen to a lot. Of course, I think he's in physical rehab. That's not important. Something that he said a long time ago that I remember is either his dad or uncle or some. He was a kid and some adult that he would ride with in the car. Right. Every time, he's very Jewish, right? He's one of the more like important Jewish people in the world. Dennis Prager is, and so his whole family's Jewish and all that. And so I think it was his granddad. He would ride with his granddad in the car as a child, and every time someone would cut off his granddad would say this like Yiddish word for anti-Semite, saying that the person who just cut him off was an anti-Semite. But the chances that is accurate are low.
Right.
But that was his perception that like you did me wrong, therefore you are this, and like maybe you can't rule it out.
Right.
But
well, I'm sure someone's going to come back and say, "Well, I did have an evangelical do something racist."
I'm sure
against you. That's my perception as far as
it has to have happened.
Well, I'm glad you brought that to the surface
Right.
because again, we're the perceptions are so mixed up, especially when we're drowning in information.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
and
good.
One last thing on this that just came to mind. The perception is always that the South is by far the most racist place, and I'm fully willing to admit that, I'm sure that was true for a long time. I don't know. I've only been alive a few years, but when I lived in New York, which presumably is like the good place as far as that kind of stuff is concerned, historically, I mean.
Right.
I'm not saying people there don't like black people, but I just never saw any. Right. So if you were an African American in New York, at least in the part where I lived, you'd probably feel quite weird just because it's not like a normal part of life,
Right.
And so I think actually as a Southerner, because there's just so many African Americans, it's like a normal part of like, this is just life, this is a normal life. This is not like weird. And so maybe, hopefully, it just feels more comfortable than if it weren't like that.
Yeah, I mean, like when it comes to like different ethnic groups, people tend to develop a mindset based off their experiences again. So if you live in a monolithic type of area where everybody is like the same color of skin, oftentimes they kind of have a blank slate of who a black person is. Like if you go to Montana, there may be racism there, but they don't view black people quite the same way as we do. Maybe like down here in Atlanta, where I'm black. I'm gonna be honest, black people are breaking into cars and like stealing stuff, like
and
every time
evil
you see,
knows
and we see
color,
that, and so exactly. Whereas in other areas where they don't really have that experience, then they have a little bit more of a blank slate. I'm not saying it's entirely blank, but they kind of approach you a little bit on more neutral grounds. Even when I went to like Europe, a little bit more of a neutral ground. But then as they start getting maybe people coming in, it doesn't have to just be black. It can be any perceived group that if they bring peace or kindness or goodness, then people tend to think, okay, that kind of represents all those people in that group. Whereas if you bring crime with you, people start, just instinctively associating you with crime. And so you do get linked in with that. I've had people kind of assume that, okay, you're part of that culture. And I'm like, no, I'm not part of that culture, even though my skin looks the same.
Well, being from New York, and when I moved here, I think a lot of people of color, they just live in the perception, the stuff you're talking about, like, and it kind of comes out of them. It's what they believe, and what comes out of them. It isn't necessarily the truth. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And that's, I guess, for the reason for the podcast tonight. Right. Because, there was one of the definitions of being a Christian is, if you had to define them, would be a truth seeker. Right. We're going to try to seek truth. It's just built in. It's baked in the cake. Right. And so, but a lot of people live in the perceptions, and a lot of it is destructive. You know what I mean?
What's painful about it is like every time because you are black, every time someone is rude to you, it could be that. Right. So there's this part of your brain that says, well, it might be that. Right. And that you can't turn it off because it could be that.
Right.
Exactly.
But it isn't necessarily.
As a black person, any negative interaction you have with a white person, 90% of your conclusion is probably the color of my skin. Right. I was really honestly shocked when I developed friends with a lot of white people, young people. In fact, this really cute girl came to me and she was like, I've had 7 speeding tickets. And I'm like, I've been driving more than you, and I don't get speeding tickets. They were she was like, cops never let me go. If I'm just 10 over, I get nailed. Wow. And I was kind of shocked when she told me. And I had a guy, great looking guy, and he was like, oh yeah, every time the cops pulled me over, they'd never let me go. I just did this little minor thing. And he said, I was even held at gunpoint one time. And so suddenly I was like, okay, I have not had all these negative interactions with cops. I've literally been stopped twice in my life. And I only deserve one, maybe. But
That's your perception. No, wait, that's your perception.
Oh, it could
now.
be, could be. I mean, people, human capacity for evil knows no bounds, so anything could happen.
And so I just kind of thought, white people are getting away with it, but if I'm black, if I get stopped, they probably have a special place in their prison for me. But that has not, so far, has not been the
and
case.
I think another thing about this topic is that the drum gets beat. Some of these perceptions the drum gets hit so often that you can't really shape a new thought.
Right.
Which again, another reason for the podcast.
It kind of gives you a glass ceiling that you have to live under now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's like heartbreaking in a way.
Right.
That I have some, or a couple of years ago, I was talking to some young black men, and we were talking about this, that, because like I just said, every rude thing that does happen to you could be because of that, and because that box it's at least always going on a little back here. It's just, it can turn into a thing where you feel like you're always behind or something, or it can turn into this thing that, like, everyone else, like you just said, everyone else has it easy. You'll always be less than everyone else, or have less, or whatever.
Right.
And that's a heartbreaking thing. And on some level, I guess, in other ways, I guess as a human, you could take the deepest wounds you've had and use them that way too, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think just black people in general are told this when they're growing up. If you get the wrong change at the cashier, it's because you're black and they assume you don't know how to count. If you are pulled over by the police, you most definitely are going to be arrested. Anything, if you don't get the job, it was because there was a white applicant right under yours. Like, you're told these things and you believe them, and then they kind of come true to some degree. But then if you live in this bubble where all your friends are only black, I happen to have a lot of white friends, you start realizing white people are getting slammed too. I'm like, you guys are going through the ringer
Which
worse
is
than
very
me. Like,
real mature of you to see that.
I was kind of shocked.
So
I could
mature.
not believe some of the
Yeah.
things some of my white friends were
this is
saying.
my
It's like,
perception.
I thought that only happened to people like me.
Right.
All right, all right, let's flip it. This is my perception. Knowing that what you're talking about and knowing the perception, because I live in the South, I notice every black guy with a nice car, and there is a lot of them. I cannot believe.
Well, we put money in our cars. I'm telling you.
I'm telling you, dude.
We live in a trailer and we drive 100,000.
I'm driving an old truck. I'm driving a
Yeah,
truck that's
me too.
15 years old. I see these black guys, because of my perception, I notice them. Like you said, you notice
one thing
all
I was going to say is, like,
there's
this
a
is,
lot of guys
this-
with some
this is
nice
actually
cars,
back,
dude.
Well, this is back to perception too. That, on some level, if you look different than everyone else, you are going to feel different than other people do on some level. But the turn of that perception is sort of like, most white people I know are trying to, like, not blend in. They're trying to, like, be seen. They're trying to be distinct in some way because they're not like seen, and so they're just like white bread. They're just noise, and so now, if you're in a majority white area and you're not white, you obviously stand out. And some days it really sucks that you stand out, But
I'm not white, so I can't speak for this.
Yeah,
but hopefully there are days in which it's an honor that you're like a distinct thing. You know what I mean? Like, I may not be everything, but I'm something.
Okay.
And I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'll never trade places, so who even knows? But it's just one of those things that, obviously I know a ton of white people, and most of them are trying to be like, hey, notice me, or what?
trying to be significant.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they're another needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
Right.
So real good. That's a great point. I never realized that, and I agree with that.
I feel like almost all humans are doing that to some degree. I don't see
Yeah.
a diminished
Yeah.
effect even in black people. Like,
Yeah.
that's why we wear all the gold chain and we get our tattoos and we get our hair done and we drive these fancy
It
cars.
is a universal
We get
thing.
these
Most
tires that keep spinning when you stop. We're like, look at me. Like, I'm not.
Let me come clean with this. Well, my point I made a minute ago, which I like what you were saying there, Zach. Right. When I see these guys, I mean, these are nice vehicles, dude. I have a saying. I go, boy, racism's been hard on them. I mean, these cats. I couldn't put gas in these cars. These are fancy rigs,
Right.
and they're often. I see it often. I'm grateful for them doing well.
Right.
I don't like the political drum constantly being beat for
You'll see it
for that perception.
You'll see it with rappers. It's
too bad.
real weird with rappers because like half the song will be about how like glamorous their life is and how they're so much richer and they have so many more hot women than you do.
Right.
And then the other half will be like how hard it is to be them, but it's all in the same like song. And so we're like,
Right.
I'm poor. I've always been poor. Everyone I know is poor. Like I don't know about any of that glamour and stuff. So it's just it's weird, you know.
Right.
But like either lane is good, but together is sort of weird. And
Right.
of course, there's historic reasons for all that blah blah blah. But just even talking about it is can be weird. But it's like it doesn't have to be. And I take that it's actually important to talk about. Not to always bring race as like a thing. I think actually it should only be mentioned like as minimally as possible. You know what I mean? Like I try to live everything about life that way. Like again, back to Dennis Prager, he had this quote that there are only two kinds of people: the decent and the indecent. And I want to like that's really what I want to like live out. You know?
Right.
But the I forgot where I was going with that. But it is a big thing where a lot of tension happens and. I think that this is where I was going with it. So like the importance of race no matter what like color you are, especially if you spend too much time on the internet, they're trying to like go back that way, like, hey, it matters again.
Right.
And they're leaving the Martin Luther King stuff and all that. They're going to some other thing.
Right.
It's like, oh, hey, on every side, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like before we leave that, let's make sure we want to be leaving that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so,
This is not to say that race doesn't play a role in reality,
Right.
and it's just my perception.
Sure.
I mean, I went to Germany, and I think I had driven less than 5 hours and got pulled over by the cops. I'm like, just because of the color of my skin, literally because of the color, they pulled me over. And so, because I was driving, I didn't break any laws, I didn't break any rules. They
You
didn't give me
rented
any
the car
ticket.
there.
I rented a car in Germany.
plate or anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, he claimed, you're driving a rental car, so that caught our attention. And I'm like, no, you pulled up next to me while we were on the Autobahn. He pulls up next to me, just looks at me straight in the eye, and then pulls me over. I literally hadn't broke any law, and he just searched my entire car, which was
my
illegal.
goodness.
Yeah.
He literally touched my bag, which is illegal. He opened the trunk, which is illegal in Germany.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he did it just because I was black. There was not a very many black people in that area, and
all right.
I played it cool, like I was a little flaming in the head, but I also was
It's
like,
weird,
this
though,
is
yeah.
not my country. This is their country.
Right.
I'm not going to play this Miranda
Right.
Wright kind of things I might play in America. I'm just going to let them do their thing and let it play out. And then they got really nice to me. I ended up joking and laughing with them, and it was all fine and good. If you can get the cops laughing, that's the easiest way to get out of a ticket. So anyway, or I actually told them, hey, I'm going to go visit some other friends. They actually are cops. So anyway, I got out of it. It was fine. But literally, I've driven for like 18 years, 20 years here in America.
Right.
Never been pulled over because of the color of my skin.
Yeah.
I drive 5 hours in Germany and pulled over for the color of my skin. Like,
Yeah.
so
All right.
racism is pretty strong.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's my perception. That's what
Right.
people in Germany would say, that, we
Yeah.
still have a little bit of a race problem there. America's called the king of racism in the world, but I don't think so. I had even an Asian friend tell me, if you go to China, stay in Hong Kong, stay in Beijing, but don't go out into the rural countries because they don't like black people. You might get killed.
Yeah.
Is that true, or is that just her perception? I don't really know.
I was at Airbnb in Washington, D.C., and there were some young women there from South Korea. Right. And they asked me if I could tell the difference between, like, if someone is Russian or Canadian or whatever. And I said I just had to hear their accent or whatever.
Right.
But it dawned on me that, like, that's sort of cool that I never even, like, thought of, like, I hadn't thought of that, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I told her, because America is quite multiracial, at least in my lifetime,
Right.
that's just, I just think of, like, people as American, and as far as, dad's family is Italian and mom's family is Scottish, but I don't think I'm Italian or Scottish, really. I just think I'm American. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, and I thank God for that, that's something, there's something beautiful about that, yeah.
Right.
But anyway, I don't want to interrupt you more.
Yeah, so then I'm kind of going to go to, like, women in this case right here. So, like, you'll hear a lot of people say, well, women back in olden times were considered property. They didn't have any rights. And even here in America, women didn't gain the right to vote until 1920. And so a lot of people see that's just proof that, we didn't value women. And I told a friend this. I thought that for a little while, and then I was like, I don't know if that's really true or not. I think that when you look at history, history shows that how you are treated is more of a function of your status and your money, not necessarily your gender. Now, obviously, women didn't have certain rights that men had, but a woman of royalty had more rights than a slave, even if you were a guy. Like if you had the status of a slave, you're not on the level with any woman that is royalty. So again, your status more, and then even like the right to vote, for example, black people, black men in this case, did not gain the right to vote until 1965 in the Jim Crow controlled South. Any state that was under Jim Crow, I think it was like 27 states, including even California, at least in certain places. The states that were under Jim Crow, black men still could not vote. So technically, black men gained the right to vote, in all 50 states after women did, after white women did. So again, just as I was saying, it was not necessarily, they actually afforded more rights to white women because really none of them were slaves than they did blacks who had recently, not well, I'll say recently, but blacks who had been freed, through the Emancipation Proclamation.
And that makes sense. So this does not apply in the case of slavery, but in some very real way, I think women have had power as long as there have been women. And and for good reason, because we did slavery, humans are evil and all the rest of it. So we're going down this like path of like, how can the world be made up of like very atomized individuals? And again, there's a lot of good associated with that and things to be grateful for. But maybe in a previous time, I don't know, I'm not a woman, but it could be that, well, okay, so one of the reasons that like sort of traditional religious people don't go along with all the feminist stuff is that religious people don't quite buy that women didn't have any power. Because there's a comedian's little quip or whatever that I'm the head of the household. Unfortunately, my wife is the neck. And it's that sort of thing where even if they didn't have like public facing power, they always had power. And now, okay, so because there are evil men who do terrible things to women, and then the whole thing falls apart. I get how we got here, and I get all that, and that is what it is. But it's likely the case that women 1,000 years ago had a bit more say than we think.
Well, I think we have to always...
It's possible anyway.
The way our view of women is kind of shaped off of almost a 50-50 single versus married landscape that we have today. Whereas if you go back to like 1890, about 90% of women were married. So even like the right to vote, there was almost... Mathematically speaking, there's no real advantage to voting if both of you are married and you're going to go and vote for the same candidate.
Right.
I think something messed up in your marriage. You call it vote for a different
what
candidate.
I was trying to say. It might have been like this household votes for X.
Yeah, exactly. Mathematically, it's going to be exactly the same outcome if you have 2 million votes versus 1 million votes if they're congruent to the same person. So you're just splitting the math in this case. And so there was no demand, I think, in their mind. I'm not saying that women shouldn't have been able to vote at that time. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying if you go back, I think if we roll time back, we might get a little peek as to why this was the case. And then second of all, it wasn't quite like you guys are subpar humans or subpar creatures. We don't need your vote.
Women are sort of why men do everything.
Right.
This is another reason. This is another way I wrote about this, but it's another way where we kind of part way. Where I part ways a little bit with some like third wave feminist stuff is that, like women are why the guy does whatever.
Right.
Like without women, like 90% of male motivation just disappears. Like I have guy friends who are just like me and them. We mutually are not like rich or famous or anything, but we don't care. And it would be the woman that like causes all the ambition and all that stuff. Right. Without that, I'm just chilling with them, and we're just until I die. Like,
right.
Like so.
Even like let's go to like women owning land. You'll be like, well, women couldn't own land either. That is mostly not true. Like women could inherit land, even in biblical days. You see where Job allowed his daughters to inherit land. Like and I looked all over the world, as a general rule of thumb, in most countries, if it wasn't war torn or if there wasn't like some horrible genocide going on, most of the time women could inherit land. But then if you minus technology out, if you take the farm tractor out, take cars out, and take a flashlight out, what is a woman going to do with 100 acres of land?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was dangerous for men to retain land. Like most wars in history were because of land.
Yeah.
Somebody's fighting over land rights.
Yes.
And even men couldn't hold land if they were not powerful enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are you going to do with the land? You're going to till it with you're going to plow it with a mule. I don't think most women wanted to unilaterally go out there with a mule and plow their garden. Like it wasn't. I don't think women were like clamoring for the right to own massive pieces of property, other than
and I
like
think,
family property.
Sure,
but technology has made it where now it's actually feasible for women to hold property.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually reasonable if they do. And then we have this massive singlehood where women are, have to own property.
Yeah, and you do see in Proverbs 31, that she considers a lot and buys it or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a beautiful thing that the Christian, which viewer probably knows this, but like all of the advancements that women have now, they don't exist without the like Judeo-Christian world. Like even if
That's
you're like
exactly
too
right.
cool for Christianity and all that, and you're over all of it, like that's not like a universal thing that goes back a million years. Like
Exactly. So the way I'll give Jim a second,
Yeah,
but
I'm loading up. I'm loading up. I've got
one more point.
Yeah.
one more bullet in the chamber.
You can say women were treated like farm animals, but I think it's a similar argument to like unborn children. I think if we fast forward time 200 years from now, people will go back and say, well, back that generation there, they didn't value unborn children. They just killed them. They didn't have any rights. But there's a group of people within the world that are fighting for unborn children. There has always been a group of people fighting for women's rights all the time. Good men have always fought for women. They just didn't have the microphone at the time. They were not able to write it down on a scroll and record it in history. So good people typically don't have the prevailing microphone. And so I don't think there's no universal, even like people saying, well, people used to think the world was flat. There's always been people who knew the world was not flat. There's always been that. But the people who had the microphone, maybe they did think the world was flat. But there's always been people who knew the world was a globe. There's always been good men who protected women, who died for women.
And we've
There's
gone
always
so
been good
far-
men who gave
Yeah.
women property, like Job giving his daughters property. There's always been men who consulted women and like, what do you think? You even see Pilate's wife saying, have nothing to do with Jesus. Don't kill him. I had a bad dream. And Pilate kind of reacts based on that. So good men have always stood up for women. And so I think if
totally
we
agree.
make this blanket statement that women were treated this way, we have to realize there was not everybody treated it that way.
Yeah, that.
Jim.
Yeah. go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, yeah. So I'm waiting to interject this point about men, biological men,
Right.
competing in women's sports, and what we see is that this reality, and even the Bible says the woman is the weaker vessel. We back to Zach's original point at the beginning of this. Go back to the beginning. Whoever made the premise of the conversation or framed the conversation has really messed up women, and so they try to make women equal with a man, which is really not smart. So okay, we got women thinking they got to be equal with a man, and the truth is, and Rush Limbaugh always said this, that women are the ones really with the power, and that was the point you were making. Because all the motivation of a man, like you said, would go away if it wasn't for women. I mean, women are, it sounds sexist or a bigot, but women are the price. Women are
I say that all the time. When you get married, 1 + 1 does not equal 2. Like I've seen my brother where he was, and then when he married, he's not equal to his wife plus him. He's like 5 times more than what he was with his wife. Like he is so motivated.
Yes.
He gets so much done.
Yes.
Yeah,
as
now we're supposed to be. I know what you're saying I think what you're saying could be taken the wrong way with the equality thing because people use that word like 100 different ways. But to move to the future point you were saying, what we're supposed to do now is we're all supposed to be like really neurotic and not ever marry and just like. We're just supposed to live and die alone, sort of, because we're so. That's just how we're like the world is like teaching us to be. That we're supposed to be like hyper individualists or whatever. And supposed to get the big desk and the big job or whatever, and give our whole life to that. And that's the meaning of your life, I guess, for some corporation or whatever. and there is some good in that, but
Right.
we're in this weirdly like anti-love like environment, sort of, even so far to the extent that it's now very like sexist that the guy who's in charge of the military now, whatever his name is, the Hegseth guy, that it's, it's like
Yes.
it's very controversial
Well-
that he said that that he doesn't think women should be in combat, but I okay, of all the things that men traditionally have done, letting men die for women seems reasonable to me.
It's pretty chivalrous,
If you're gonna,
right?
Yeah.
To
if
die
there's
for a
some
woman?
traditional thing you have to let them do,
Right.
dying
Well,
for you
yeah.
seems like a reasonable one. That's
And they've always done
And
that.
that's kind of that's my point. That is my point.
Yeah.
You're kind of got to the end of it, but we live in a world where the man who's competing in that woman's sport, he is physically stronger, and the world is set up like this, and so the woman really needs protection. She needs to be able to compete with other women.
Right.
She needs someone to come in and say the men wouldn't be in there. But let's take this to my home.
Right.
The world is full of dangerous people. Let's take Lake and Riley and all that. The world is full of dangerous people.
Right.
And so I protect my wife. So and some women will perception see that as she's property. Oh, that's your perception. The reality is that she's the weaker vessel, but like a cell phone is not a hammer, a man more like a hammer, and a woman more like a cell phone. She's very intricate. She can do things that are amazing. She's a completer, but she needs protection. So she's kind of my property, they would say, right? Don't say that. No, it's something I'm caring for. I wrap my arms. I've been married 35 years. I'm going to take care of her. If I hear something in the middle of the night, I don't say, "Baby, I hear something."
Let's get Sandy on. Let's get your
Yeah.
wife on. And
Little Jimmy's going to get up, and so half you women out there are going to say, "Oh, he's a chauvinist." No, it's because women need protect. They don't need to compete with men.
Yeah.
They don't need to. When these two mix,
Right.
they need. I'm her husband. I am her protector.
Did you
Yeah.
see that sport where some transgender guy beat in the women's sports by 5 hours?
Yes.
Beat the women by 5
5 hours set the new record.
Yeah, it's
Women's
weird.
sport.
It's that weird thing. It's that weird thing in TV shows where there'll be like this really dainty, beautiful, like blonde woman who's like 90 pounds or whatever, and she just beats up like 3 like meatheads that are like 300 pounds or whatever. And it's just like, this is weird, man.
Back to your
it would just
top.
use a gun or whatever. You know, I'm fine with the woman winning the into altercation, but just to make it real. But
Right.
to your point, to the counter argument to your point, which I think is actually you didn't really quite give the devil his due, is that there are ways, since as you've gotten older and more mature and stuff, where you've changed a little bit. You've become like a little bit more humble towards. I think you've always the reason that I'm on the more traditional side partially is because I do see how much mutual love there is. There's not just power, and that's this evil progressive thing that everything is just power. All marriage is rape. Everything is just power. Love doesn't exist. It never did. You were stupid to think it did. Like, it doesn't exist. And so that's so evil and wrong.
Right. Correct. It's wrong.
But as you have gotten older, you said to me the other day actually about Mom that like I want to make sure that you're not like crushing who she is and stuff,
Right.
because of who you are and stuff. And so
Well, it's one of the problems with being a man. All right.
Yeah.
Even in the Bible, it says to treat your wife as an equal.
yeah,
Meaning, because as you are a protector, it's too easy to throw your weight around.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's one of the challenges of men. And so it's one of our challenges. So,
Yeah.
but you can't, perception again,
Right.
you can't just say all men are chauvinists and they're just, it's not.
And-
it's
and this
not.
is a very-
But that drums beat.
You know, when as a man,
beat a
if
lot.
you get to the point where you have to like, and I'm not married, but I can still say this from principle. If you get to the point where you have to like point down at your wife and say, "Respect me," there's
It's already
a
over,
problem.
yeah.
It's over.
There's already a problem because
Yeah.
the respect, women will respect a man they truly love. Men will treat a woman with kindness and chivalry and that kind of thing if they truly love them. If you have this, if you're a girl or female and you're dating this guy and this guy's going like 4 or 5 days and not texting you and he doesn't do anything for you and he doesn't check on you or anything like that, he's not in love with you. He might love you, but he's not in love with you.
I agree with that.
So,
Yes.
yeah. So I heard this quote on a movie the other day that men are scared that women will laugh at them. Women are scared that men will kill them, which is it was some like feminist woman, Margaret Atwood, actually, whose quote it was. But there's some truth to it.
Yes.
But again, why I'm a little bit more on the traditional side, specifically on this topic, is that the real male dream is not to like put a gun to a woman's head and be like, "You will respect me." Like that is not the dream.
Right.
The dream is to earn it for real, and it's real.
You have to earn it, and there's good men out there that do earn it, and women still don't respect them, and they're in violation at that point. But let's move to another topic: giving aid to the poor. So when I went to Johannesburg, Africa, they were like, "Don't give anybody on the street any money," and I was like, "Why not? Like we should." But you know, we have all these. I have so many friends on social media. I'm a big fan of having adversarial friends on social media. Not that I really engage with them, but I have both liberal and Democrat friends on social media. I'll pull up CNN every morning, and I'll pull up Fox News every morning. I'll pull up MSNBC. I'll pull up Breitbart. Like I pull up all of them. I'll pull up both sides, and I think this keeps me level-headed. I know what these guys are saying, and I know what those guys are saying. Some people are just so intolerant to one side. They have this tunnel vision toward just what they want to believe. But anyway. Giving aid to the poor, you have like all these government programs that I saw one government program where we're going to give condoms out. And I had a Christian friend come in. Well, she called herself Christian. She said, well, I don't believe in abortion, but I think that we should be for these government programs that give condoms out. I really think that, giving condoms out and some type of contraception is better than, an abortion. And I'm like,
it probably is better than abortion.
I said it is better than an abortion, but I want you to understand something. If you want to help these communities, you can't help them downstream to the problem. You got to help them at the source. Right. And a lot of the government programs are like helping poor way downstream after the problem has just blossomed out of control. Right. So you have to help it at the source. If you give too much to the poor, it destroys their dignity. As a young man, teenager man, if I realized my mom went up to the health clinic and came back home with a box of condoms because she was sleeping with random different men, do you really think I'm going to respect my mom? Oh, my mom's the greatest. She just got some condoms so she's because she's so responsible. No, I'm not going to think that. I'm going to think my mom is a piece of trash. Like I'm literally not going to respect them. So I think in a lot of poor communities, there's a lack of dignity, there's a lack of respect, and I think if you dole out too much government help to these people, they lose their dignity. They lose. There's something precious about a man coming home dirty, sweaty, or worked all day, stressed out, or whatever it is. If you work blue collar, or if you work white collar, coming home and just dealing with and having survived the rough work day, and you did this in sacrifice for your wife and for your children. I remember as a young teenage boy, I would look up to my dad. I remember one time my dad came in and he just threw out $1,500 on the table. He had worked really hard on this project and he had $1,500, and back in the, I guess it was like in the 90s, that was a lot of money. And I was such a proud feeling in my heart for my dad. I'm like, my dad made all that money. It's more money than I've ever seen in my life. But if my dad would have came back home with government checks and assistance, I would not have had that proud moment. So I think that you have to reinforce. People need pride. They need dignity. Like we use pride as like a bad thing, but there's a good type of pride where you feel accomplished. A lot of times we think that if we get everything we want and gain everything we want very easily, then we're going to be happy. But happiness is actually built out of doing challenging things and sacrifice. You feel so happy when you like climb this mountain and you almost slip multiple times and you made it to the top. Like there's some type of adrenaline rush from that. And it goes way down to the lowest sectors of just working hard and striving. If you do too much for the poor, in this case, they told us not to give money to people in Johannesburg, but they said if you give them money, then someone's going to break into their home and kill them maybe at night or something like that. But even like extended government care, your children are going to respect you far more when they see you leave the house every day, come back home and work, than if you're sitting on the couch just watching TV and taking food stamps. They're not going to have any. It doesn't teach them a work ethic at all.
Yeah, and internally, I totally agree with everything you just said.
No doubt.
Over the last, like a couple of years ago or whatever, which I've worked full time before it was legal, since I was like 14 or something, but even still, I was saving money living in a house that you owned in your rental house, and I had to come to you and be like, "This is chipping away at me. I need the I need the pressure. Like I need the rent pressure and all that. I need to be like formed the way it will form me."
Right.
And I'm going through a lot of like depression and stuff because I'm not allowing myself to have the problems I should be having.
Those challenges.
Yeah,
Fight.
and it also brought to mind one time I was taking this supplement called lithium, which I don't recommend, at least not anymore. And we won't get into that because I could talk about it for a long time. But the really short version of how it relates to what you're saying is that I started to have this weird experience towards the end where I stopped taking it, where I couldn't feel anything because I couldn't remember the things that I would be sad about. So I wasn't sad, but it's because I couldn't remember what I would be sad about. I couldn't remember the painful things that happened to me.
Right.
And they're only painful because they're things that I, at one time or still, care very deeply about.
Right.
So, like, when they were not there, I wasn't in just, like, floating in, like, bliss. I was in, like, one of the scariest, like, places I've ever been.
Right.
Because I thought, what if it stays like this? What I can never remember who I am and what I went through and stuff. And so that taught me in a way, you know how, like, you know stuff up here, but then you know stuff, like, in here. And that taught me, like, in my gut, like, that the struggles you've been through are so much more valuable to every single day than I ever thought before that. Right. Because when I couldn't remember them anymore and I didn't feel anything about them because I couldn't remember them, it was one of the scariest moments of my life. And so there's some like thing in which the suffering that you overcome is like how like a diamond is made of you or something like that.
All right. I just, somewhat listening to you, Zach, you made me think of the love story. And if you go 2-3 weeks back when one of our first podcasts, we were talking about the love story, and it's God's love story. And you're making me think of it. It's that the man, and you made me think of it. If a man doesn't, if he can't really lay his life down for his girl, he needs a battle. He needs the battle. If he doesn't have the battle, it messes with his sex life. It messes with his whole life. It messes with the attraction. It messes with his masculinity. Mm-hmm. Men need the battle. They need it for their integrity. What you said, I too agree with every word you said. And if you feel like Big Brother's giving you a check, it's almost like crippling to a man. A man, it doesn't help him. It's just really a fine line.
It's like helping a chicken out of the egg. If a chicken's trying to make its way out of the egg, they have what they call a little sharp point on their beak, and as they're trying to hatch, they literally rotate in the egg. It takes a lot of strength, and they literally cut this circle right out of the top of the egg. If you look at the egg, the narrow part is where their feet are, and the wider part is where their head is. They will cut it out. But I remember as a kid, I would help these chickens out of the egg every time they were weak and could not make it on their own very well for the first few days of their life. You just cannot help. You have to let that chicken make its way out of the egg on its own. I will say that, a lot of Christian people will come in and say, well, the Bible tells us we should help the poor. We should help the poor. We should help the poor. I think people need to understand that helping the poor in the Bible is more about helping the needy, not necessarily just the poor. I mean, because somebody who's wealthy can break down beside the road and be on Georgia 400, and there's like cars going everywhere, and they're literally, their life is on the line, and you should help them. And then someone who's poor can squander everything they're given, and they can be addicted to narcotics, and
poor
you just
in America
cannot give that poor person anything, because the Bible's really teaching to help the needy. And then I'll use a particular verse in the Bible where the Jewish people were literally told not to glean the outsides of their fields, to leave those fields for the poor. Mm-hmm. Now, in America, that would be glean everything you got and then give a portion to the poor. But then you notice the Bible does not tell them to give everything and give it to the poor. It says they got to go out there and get it. And we modern people probably have no idea how hard it is to go out there.
Come on.
And glean a field. Like bugs are going to be jumping on you. The sun is coming down on you. They were not given anything. And then you can look at Joseph. When Joseph saved Egypt with Pharaoh, this was a famine. This was no one faking that they didn't have anything. They really, at first they had to give up their They had to give up their cattle, their sheep, their livestock. They had to give up their land. Like Joseph didn't just give them free grain, saying, "Oh, we're in a famine. Let me just give you grain." He didn't do that. He made them pay for it every single time, all the way to the point where the people had to almost pretty much sell themselves into slavery to Joseph. This was Joseph working from the wisdom of God, taking care of these people. He didn't give them anything, and so, when I traveled to Costa Rica, a lot of here in America, you'll just see people looking for a handout beside the street. But something I really liked when I was in Costa Rica is there was lots of homeless people. They were never asking for anything for free. They would always come up and be like, "Sir, can I wash your window if you give me a quarter? If when you go and shopping, I'll put my I'll put my chair behind your car and I'll watch your car for you." And they really would. I'll give them a quarter, and they literally just sit behind your car and they'd be like, "I'm gonna watch your car and make sure nobody steals it." And it was like, "Oh, I like that," because particularly if you went to the beach and you had things in your car. Now, obviously, some of them probably couldn't be trusted, but some of the local people were like, "Oh yeah, that guy's out here all the time. He's homeless." I love the fact that they always offered to do something. They didn't ask for a handout. They just did it. And so obviously if you're disabled, you have to be given. We're not talking about people who are disabled, but somebody who is just asking for a handout because they're poor. Use your hands, use your brain, there's probably something you can do.
Yes.
Well, and it's worth dying for. I mean, a man, we're built for this. We're made for this.
Right.
I mean, you take this away from somebody, and I had one of my mentors say, "I don't care what happens to me, I'm never parking in the handicap because I'm not going to admit to myself internally that I'm a handicap, no matter what I'm dealing with." And it's part of how our internal identity. We got to be careful that we don't cripple ourselves and we don't let anyone else cripple ourselves. And and even if the job, you're working a job that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense or there's no status tied to it. No, you get in there and give it all you got. And we all had to do that. And we still, I'm a landscaper. People walk right by me, don't give me the time of day right now. They just see me as some servant. I think the bushes get more attention than I do. But who cares? I know what I'm doing it for. It is a battle. It's a huge struggle. I got dirt under my nails right now, but there's something to it.
Two quick things. One was directly what you just said. Two things. One, just perfectly on this topic and on perception. Right. People right of center actually do give more to charity. Just like you can in math, you can look it up online, and pure dollars. They give more than people.
That's absolutely true. It's been well known, documented that. I mean, even when it comes to adoption and fostering, who's doing that? Evangelicals.
Yeah, you think
giving more.
Maybe you think it'd be the
people who say no government programs, right?
Yeah, and then the only other thing I wanted to mention, which Dad kind of already covered, is that because right-wing virtues are kind of masculine, it can go far enough that it loses the Christian center. And so what I mean by that is, without any conceit, I respect every single person that works anywhere.
That's right.
And it is not I'm not putting this on because it sounds like a sweet thing that would make me seem like a sweet boy. No, I just literally respect every person who works at McDonald's, every gas station.
I do too.
Because I have some idea of the demons that went on in their head on the way and all of that, and how they're still, sometimes you can see it on the person's face, they're still in there going nuts. Right. But they are there. And they're saying, today, this is what I can do. And I just have so much there's so much honor in it, and I feel so much respect for people that do any kind of work.
I do too.
I respect that too.
Yeah, I do too. Let me quickly jump this so I don't forget. The Bible says in the Great Commission to make disciples, and is to make a disciple. If you're dealing with poor or you're dealing with needy, it's still one of the main hearts of God was to help raise that person. And what you're talking about with the dignity and helping people with just building skills or anything is more like a disciple maker. Right. And that's way more challenging than giving them a $20 bill. I mean, but like you said, Christians are still, here we are talking about it. Right. We're trying to take the high road with people, and just handing them something ain't necessarily going to help them. Right.
So that's I know we were talking, we're going to expand, I think, this idea of helping the poor. So I think that's a pretty large topic. But I was really talking about the perception. You have this perception that if I do something, if I help the poor, then I'm truly helping them. But sometimes you're just enabling them, and you're not really helping them at the source or at the root. And sometimes you honestly can't. There's some exceptions where maybe you should just give them something, honestly. But as a general rule of thumb, this is very broadly speaking, you're not always doing as much good as you think. Sometimes when you give a handout versus when you maybe help them at the source of what creates the poverty in the first place.
Yeah, I do. When someone asks, I have like kind of a rule. If someone asks me for money, I will give them something. Right. And what I think of it, but I agree with what you're saying.
I do too.
But what I decided was that, okay, we know this person, we can fully establish this person is not good with money, or they wouldn't be in this position. So that box is checked. There's no question about that. What I do instead is just try to use this little moment to just like speak to them for a minute. It's sort of like, I'm buying your time for just for this minute.
Right.
And like by like looking in the eye, and actually this is totally like gross actually that I'm mentioning all this, but I shouldn't, you know what I mean? It's like the biblical thing that you should never talk, whatever.
Make a disciple.
But whatever.
It's worth, you need
but
to
it's sort of like, by giving you these few dollars, I just want to like be a human to you and just like kind of look you in the eye and like be warm to you. And sometimes it's been a thing where like you got to like pray with them and stuff, and just like to be like kind to them, and just use the like money as like, I'm going to buy this moment right here.
Right.
And
interesting.
And that's the only, but that's it. But if there is a better way that like where they don't have to be that person a year from now, that way's better.
This is my perception, and I think it's reality. But if a woman stands on the street, she gets like 10 times more people giving her a handout than if a dude stands on the street. And so I literally gave a woman a $20 bill the other day. She was standing beside the street, and I was like, whatever, give it to her. So I gave it to her because it was cold, and she was not adequately dressed, and she was shivering. And I'm like, poor woman. I just gave her $20. And as soon as I pulled away, I looked and I saw this dude coming out of the wood line and go and stand next to her. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's the scheme. Let the woman be the storefront, and while I kind of sit back. And they may need the money. It may have helped them. I don't know. But there, you do have that facade where even, there's even, you got to be careful these days where women will pretend like their cards broke down, and then a dude will come out and rob you, so you got to be careful. But, people get online and argue about all kind of stuff. And I got friends, even now, if I look at my news feed, someone is arguing about something through the lenses of their own empirical perception. And so as Christians, we got to be truth seekers. We have to seek reality. Reality is not always pretty. It's sometimes I even cringe when I realize what the reality is. But I don't think any of us have a complete picture of reality. And so I think that's why we need community. We need multiple eyes all on the same topic. We need to be held accountable. You even have to bring adversarial opinions in sometimes. You don't have to bring an adversarial opinion to God in. I'm not telling you to do that. But you have to bring in different viewpoints and at least get these people to expound upon, why do you believe what you believe? Why do you say this? And hear them out. And so I think we kind of have gotten, I don't know whether humans have really changed, honestly. I want to say we're in an age where people don't listen to dissent, but I think people probably have always been that way. But we don't want to listen. We don't want to listen to anything. I would tell you to go listen, whatever news channel you're typically listening to, go listen to a channel that speaks something different, and just see what they say. Even if you know it's wrong, like I listen to things that I know are wrong, but I still want to know what are the talking points and why do these people even arrive at that anyway. So
I want to say something about that. A few things actually. Before the election, I guess I wrote this piece about like explaining why I voted for Trump and kind of like why a lot of Christians did, I guess, because I understand why you could say that they wouldn't. But at the beginning, the goal, that's not really where I'm going with this. The goal was, if possible, I want to write this in a way that if you're not of this persuasion, you won't feel like there was any little like jabs in it. You know what I mean? Right. It'll be like, well, I understand how that guy works now, but no like, and he turned the knife a few times just because it's fun or whatever, And so the way that I did that was in the beginning, I said that the main difference between me and people who vote differently from me is that they believe people that I don't believe, and I believe people that they don't believe.
Right.
But we're not, me and this other average person, we're quite similar.
Right.
So there's like an artifice where they hear this and they believe that, and then they hear the next thing, they believe that too, and then they hear the third thing and they believe that, and then they arrive at this other conclusion. And I don't believe any of that, but me and them, we're quite similar. We're not opposite. We're not so different. If I believe the things they did, I go where they went.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Which is perception.
Right. So there's no superiority of me over them or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's it's not like that. And then the other thing is, because we live in the time we do, it can be hard to figure out how do you get something that's like reasonably true, like who to listen to, more or less. And so I think the simplest way to get through that is whoever will outline their enemy's argument the most accurately.
Yeah, if you understand the opposition and you totally understand what they're saying. And
like if you take the way that Shapiro could lay out his enemy's position and the way Shapiro's enemy would lay out his position, he's 10 times more accurate about them than they are about him or whatever, that sort of thing.
Jim, what have you done? You have the most experience at this table, so I'm kind of defer to you. What have you done in your life to kind of hone in what reality is and divorce yourself from these opinionated perceptions? What's something that you can probably tell people to do to like keep yourself on point?
Yeah.
Where you're not like, I saw somebody told me, they said weirdness grows with loneliness.
Yeah.
And so how do you like not be weird?
Okay.
And not have these, it's probably going to be dubbed conspiracy theory if you like hold this really way out false perception, or maybe it's true. What have you done? What's some tips?
Well, what I'm doing, again, I run a landscape business, and but I have a flip phone, and I whipped this thing out. I turned it off. If it's a flip phone with a crash, this thing fell in the lake. When you call me, I don't even know who it is. I got to answer it to find out who's calling me. So I always answer the phone. But there's my technology. I really don't chase every opinion all day long. I try to get out of like swimming in constant information. And it's because I can't really touch the ground. I knew what I was doing when I got rid of my TV, too. I got rid of my TV 28 years ago.
Right.
Joshua.
Right.
No television. The shows that were on when I got rid of my TV were these were prime time.
We're gonna do
Friends, and Seinfeld. Those were the prime time. I don't care to line up for the perception of what's coming out of L.A. and New York and Miami. I don't care. I left New York on purpose, and so that's what I'm doing.